Diffusion. Diffusion is something that you have to take time to get your mind wrapped around. You can't just let that word diffusion go into your brain and out the other side of your ear. Diffusion, you have to really take time to understand it. Even through the PowerPoint presentation I'm putting on now, if you don't understand it, I need you to send me a message and let's jump on a call and go over it one on one. You've got to understand diffusion. Not only does diffusion play a big role in the respiratory system, but it also plays a big role throughout the entire body. And we'll talk about osmosis and diffusion as we get into other chapters as well. But here in the respiratory chapter, we're going to talk about diffusion. So let's take a look at it. It says diffusion is a process by which molecules move from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration until they are what? Until they are evenly distributed. It means something at a very concentrated high level is going to make its way to an area that is of a lower concentration, pretty much until they're equal on both sides. And I'm going to break out and I'll show you on the e-glass here in just a little bit what that looks like so you'll have an idea as opposed to just hearing a definition. It happens because there's a random movement of particles. Talking about diffusion, why it happens? It happens because there's a random movement of particles. It does not require energy. There's you a test question and answer. Is diffusion an active or a passive process? It is a passive process, meaning it does not require energy. It continues until equilibrium is reached on both sides. It means it's like if you were putting something on the scales and one side was more than the other, you'd keep putting things on the scale until they were both equal, meaning equilibrium. It means they're equal on both sides. That's how diffusion works. It'll go back and forth from left to right, right to left until it's equal on both sides. So what it's getting there, what they're wanting you to understand is that when you're bringing oxygen in, meaning you're bringing air from the atmosphere into your upper airways, nasal pharynx, the larynx, the trachea, the windpipe, coming all the way down into the carina to the right and left bronchi, bronchioles, all the way down into the alveoli, those microscopic air sacs. They want you to know that once that air is down into those alveoli, inside of that air is oxygen molecules. And those oxygen molecules are under a lot of pressure inside of those alveoli, and they'll make their way from the alveoli. They will push through the surfactant, which is what covers the inside of the alveoli. It'll push through the surfactant, through the alveoli, and it will move into the vascular space. That's why I have this picture here. I want you to see how this oxygen moves from that vascular space, right? How it's moving into that vascular space and how the CO2 is moving out of that vascular space and into the alveoli. So remember, it's oxygen in and CO2 out. Oxygen in the bloodstream, CO2 out of the bloodstream. Movement of carbon dioxide, right? So carbon dioxide moves by diffusion, just like oxygen, but it's moving in the opposite direction. Remember, the oxygen is coming in from the atmosphere all the way down to the lower airways, and CO2 is in the bloodstream, making its way back to the lungs. And once it gets to those alveoli, and remember the alveoli are covered with vessels. What kind of vessels? Capillary vessels, right? And these vessels are filled with blood. And inside of that blood, there is CO2. And this CO2 that's inside the bloodstream, because it is articulating and covering that air sac, it's under pressure. And what kind of pressure? It's under that diffusion type pressure. Remember? So if you have oxygen on one side and CO2 on the other side, the oxygen is going to move from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration. And the CO2 is very concentrated and high in the bloodstream, and it's going to move its way from an area of high concentration to an area of lower concentration. So it's going to move from the bloodstream into the alveoli to be exhaled. It's going in the opposite direction. In the lungs, the alveoli, right? The alveoli, blood arriving at the lungs has high CO2 concentration. Yeah, absolutely. The air in the alveoli has what? Has the low CO2 concentration. That's why CO2 is making its way out of the bloodstream into the alveoli because it's under great pressure, and that is a passive process. Therefore, CO2 diffuses from the blood into the alveoli where it is exhaled. And you can see in this little picture I have here for you that the oxygen easily moves from the alveoli into the bloodstream, and the CO2 goes from the bloodstream into the alveoli, and there's a good gas exchange. Henceforth, oxygen is a gas, CO2 is a gas, and this is where gas exchange is taking place. A very, very wordy and a little bit long explanation, but I want you guys to listen to my voice and listen to what I'm saying, because this is the core fundamental. This is the foundation of being a great EMT, of being a great advanced EMT, to being a great paramedic, registered nurse, even being a physician. You have to understand this process. And if you understand it, I promise you, you're going to be 100 times better than most EMTs that you work with. And they're going to go, man, you're really smart. Girl, you got your knowledge is like off the chart. I don't understand that, because a lot of publishers and EMT instructors, they glance over this. They just throw it out there, one or two slides, and they move on. But I want to emphasize that diffusion is what? A passive process, something from a higher concentration to that area of lower concentration to their equilibrium on both sides. So O2 in, CO2 out. And that's what the respiratory system is really all about. Didn't mean to rhyme, but I'm just keeping it 100. We'll take a look at this video here as well. I've got it uploaded for you. Diffusion, movement of oxygen and carbon dioxide until they're equal on both sides. And you can see how, now this is at a very microscopic level. See how you got the O2 moving in, CO2 moving out. And this process continues over and over and over until everything is equal on both sides.